Hey, how's it going, everyone? I am James SP, the content creator, and welcome to the James Paul Show. Today, I've got Scheiloh Wolf. You all are familiar with who he is. We've had him on the show a few times before, and he's back. And today, you all are going to learn about Izzy. But before we get to Izzy, and I'm not going to tell you all who Izzy is, but before we get to that, hey, how's it going? How's it going, Scheiloh?
It's going pretty good.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me back.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So the last time we talked, right? We've been talking about mental health.
That's right.
And I believe the last conversation that we had, we left off with the invisible wounds, right?
Yeah.
So let's jump right into that.
Yeah. So I think that's a really good place to start because first and foremost, our perception is reality, right? And when we think of visible and invisible wounds or visible or invisible injuries, society kind of looks at those vastly different. And so a great place, I think, is to just kind of cover what those are. When we look at visible wounds, it's easy for us to generate empathy for that.
Yeah.
We see somebody who is perhaps missing a limb, or somebody who is in a wheelchair, or clearly physically compromised in some way, from some sort of injury, perhaps something occurring at birth, and we can say, oh, okay, and if someone is approaching the door in a wheelchair or crutches or something like that, we have this natural want to help. We'll open a door for them,
Right.
whether they want us to or not.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so much different when we talk about invisible injuries because one, we can't see them. So our line of empathy has a tendency to be delayed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like for me, as an example, I have a disabled veteran handicap sticker on my vehicle.
Right.
And when I get out of the car, I'll stroll on over to the back, open the door, and grab a bag of groceries.
Right.
Somebody who doesn't know any better is gonna be like, oh, this clown right here.
Yeah. He's just got a sticker, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
How did he work that system,
right,
or whatever?
And
there's so much more to that, and so right out of the gate, when you think about post-traumatic stress, PTSD, not just in the military context, but in any context,
right.
Trauma in of itself can be the source of maladaptive behavior, maladaptive thinking, and really a focal point for all sorts of mental health issues.
Right.
But that one's kind of obvious. We know that veterans that come back that suffer from PTSD, we tend to naturally have more empathy for that person because they quote unquote went to war.
Right.
But what about someone who was involved in a car accident, or somebody who was sexually assaulted, or somebody who had grew up in a perhaps dangerous environment, a broken home, or something to that effect. And so they're fine. They can walk, they can talk, they can do their thing. And so it's interesting how we have to almost learn someone's story to generate empathy for invisible wounds. Yeah. Which takes time and makes you less likely, unless you're courteous, to open the door for them, So with that, there's a huge array, diabetes is an invisible wound in a way, it's, if somebody doesn't have the things they need, their insulin or their medications or their ability to check, they can fall out in a grocery store. It's the same thing if you're prone to seizures. That individual is likely to be able to do anything or everything you or I can on a daily basis. Right. But at all of a sudden, they fall out and go into seizure, and not all seizures look the same. Some are kind of the ones that we've seen on TV or perhaps in real life, epileptic seizures, where an individual will fall on the ground and seize, whereas some are silent seizures. They'll sit in a chair and they'll kind of zone out, this effect of lucidness to them, and they're also seizing. And so we don't look at that the same, because before or after that moment, they're just like you and I. And in a way, that is good. We don't want to treat someone differently because they're suffering from something different.
Right.
But it's also bad because we don't express the same care or concern for that person.
Right.
And the thing about that is, those individuals tend to have caregivers. And so that's another thing. Like, the average person walking around is not really dealing with their own wars and their own issues and their own stressors, but not necessarily an injury or an illness or something to that effect. People who they tend to have caregivers, for the most part, and or someone, checking on them.
Right.
And so,
I get that, and the thing when we talk about the invisible wounds, it kind of reminds me of the carbon monoxide scenario, right? Because it's in there.
Yeah.
You don't know it.
That's right.
And it's slowly, wearing out on you, or slowly really killing you.
Yeah.
In that sense, but
yeah, that's a good example. When before the carbon monoxide sensors came in, and if there was, you parked your car in the garage and you left the car running.
Right.
I mean, the whole house could, not wake up the next morning.
Right.
So it's and these things kind of happen. Or if you are to survive that, you may have some permanent injuries, cognitive injuries. And if that's the case, but even further, like if you have a kid in sports, you have someone playing football, or something that you may not think would risk, like maybe volleyball or something like that, where they take a head injury, and then, be fine for 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And suddenly they're starting to act differently.
Right.
That could be a byproduct from the injury from high school, middle school, college, whatever the case may be. So, I mentioned caregivers, and so in my world, I kind of talk from more of a military background. It's different because we came, when we came back from Iraq, Afghanistan, certainly wasn't the same as when my dad came back from Vietnam.
Right.
Where he just kind of kept his head down and did whatever he had to do to grind it out and get through life. We came back a little bit different. Society backed us. They were proud of us. They did what they could do to help. But at the end of the day, it's still our responsibility to get up and go to work, right? So,
what was that like, though? Right?
Yeah. For me, it wasn't so bad. When I left service, active duty, I was still in the Guard for additional 3 years, but I was in the infantry, and when I came out, I was the best I've ever been. You know what I mean? I left the job on a Friday. I started a new job on Monday.
Right. So you transitioned.
Oh yeah. Now I'm not, we talked before.
Right.
I'm an anomaly.
Exactly.
Some of them show up at home with their duffel bag and like, well,
figure it out.
What do you mean there's no classified papers anymore?
Yeah.
I got to go online and fill out an application and do what?
Yeah.
So, all of a sudden it's different. All of a sudden you don't have insurance. All of a sudden you have to figure out things that, everyone else has been doing,
Right.
And but for me it was good. And I really, I cannot give enough praise to the leadership I had, and I know not every soldier can say this.
Right.
But especially my unit, I was in 269 AR, and Fort Benning is my final duty station. And I just, from the moment I arrived to the moment I left, I heard all these terrible stories of Kelly Hill and 3rd Brigade and the unit I was in. And, And when I got there, I gotta tell you, it was the best leadership I ever had. It was some of the most supportive people. So I had the best soldiers, but what was really important about that is between that unit and my previous unit, I had a terrific squad leader who said, if you get a bump, bruise, boo-boo,
right,
if anything happens, you put it on paper.
Wow.
And which is totally in contrast to the attitude of the infantry. You know,
Right.
if you get, you don't go to sick call for anything. If you're a Marine, you don't go to sick bay for anything unless it's, you know, life, limb, or eyesight.
Right.
Right. And so, but that's not how my unit was. They're like, listen, I know too many people who got out. Keep in mind that, you know, we're at this point in the game, we were 7-8 years into a war, and they're like, you don't skip out. You make sure every T is crossed, every I is dotted, because when you get out, you may not get the support you need.
Right.
You know, and not because it's some malicious act from the VA. It's they need evidence. You know, just like anyone else, we need evidence to figure out what happened to you, so we know how to fix you and or you know, take care of you in another way. So I did that from the moment I showed up for my first duty station. I'm like, oh, heat stroke, check. Let's put that on paper.
Right.
It's like just the stuff that, you know. And so with that, I left Fort Benning. I had a full record of detailed records of everything that happened to me that got submitted to the VA right out of the gate. And then, and I encourage, if veterans are listening to this, or active duty especially is listening to this,
right,
every I, every T.
Every T. That's right.
It doesn't matter what it is, because the truth is, and it sounds, I don't know, insensitive, but while you're there, nobody cares.
Yeah.
You have a job to do.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
No one's, and what I mean by no one cares is no one's going to care after. You know what I mean? You show up, you do your work, you do everything you can to be successful, to make your unit successful. And then when you leave, you're so worried about the badges. You know, you're so worried about, did I get the airborne? Did I get the air assault? Did I do special forces? Am I a sniper? All these, you know, cool jobs. But when you get out, in the job market that is not military, everyone's just going to shrug and say, well, yeah, that's cool. But, you know, can you do basic math? You know what I mean? They want to know. They want to know, can you do the job that you're going to be hired for?
Yeah. So it's like, imagine that struggle plus the invisible wounds.
Right. And so, yeah, so that's the one thing. Make sure you're covered, you know, get your medical stuff. But then here's the thing. And the reason why I thought it was so important to bring up everything, because I took some concussive hits. My patrol base was, we lived almost on top of a burn pit.
Wow.
There were chemical strikes in the area from 10 years ago that the unit trampled through. Everything, you know, from that's just chemical in the soil.
Yeah.
In of itself may be inert, or may not be, you know, anything today. But then you compound that with various types of chemicals, arsenic or cyanide that's in the burn pits, or other harmful chemicals, and then you take on any physical injuries, concussive injuries, really, especially if you experience an IED or some type of explosive munition. And whether you buy into it or not, even firing your weapon is concussive injury. Especially, so when you, and I'm not talking just for hearing, but every time you experience a recoil from a weapon, it generates over time, long periods of time, microconcussion. So all these over time can lead to long-term injuries. So when I got out, started a job, I went to work, pretty successful, and then it wasn't until almost 5 years later where you know my wife would say, you know, are you doing okay? Are you feeling okay? Yeah, I'm good. You know, whatever, life, grind, whatever. Right. You know, kids, just like any of us. But it was different. She was starting to identify signs of depression. And in of itself, you know, we talked to our local doctor. We didn't even talk to the VA about this. We just went to, I had a general practitioner, because by then I was working for the university. And they said, well, let's try you on an antidepressant. And we kind of left it at that. And then finally, when I did go to the VA, I explained what was going on with my general practitioner. He's like, all right, let's swap you out and put you on this antidepressant. You know, and so then started the really starting to see the cracks. And then at the top of 2020, in January, I went into full-blown crisis.
Wow.
I'd had some suicidal ideation in the past, and it was fleeting, though, you know, that deeper sense of mortality, that not just from military experience, but I was a child of trauma.
Right.
My mom was a rape homicide. I signed the NDR when my dad passed away, and so he had pneumonia coded 4 times. They're like, you got to sign this, So my closest cousin, the one who was just there for me through thick and thin, was strangled by her husband. So this before I even stepped foot in the military,
against the odds,
I had some there were some concerns.
Yeah,
but I was fully functional. I was able to synthesize information well.
Right.
My dad said you'll never master a trade, but you are certainly a jack of all trades. I was able to do a lot of things well, just not to mastery, And then and so going out of the military into the job market and everything was just fine. But when we started seeing those cracks for depression, man, it almost seemed like it was like a crack in the dam, and then slowly but surely the water started speeding up, making a bigger hole. And so the thing about 2020, the final straw, the last thing, and it's really no fault of theirs. I'm probably one of the few veterans that have nothing good things to say about the VA, but we had just moved back from Belize. We had spent some time there, and I'm also a certified scuba instructor, so we did a little bit of moving, and we get back and we moved to the Atlanta area over in Carrollton, and I couldn't get into the Carrollton VA, which is like 5 blocks from where I live.
Wow. Yeah.
So they sent me to a place over in Lawrenceville, and now I'm human. I make a lot of mistakes, but one thing I don't mess around with is the dates for my VA appointments. And this kind of started the whole thing. I went all the way to Lawrenceville. We're there on time. I have all my record. I'm ready. My first appointment. I know I can't. I don't want to screw that up. I want to get in good with a doctor. I want to have a good conversation. And I get there, and I am also in a place where I know we came back because I started showing more and more signs of depression, more and more signs I'm not handling stress well.
Right.
And I was already kind of, best way to explain it, I was already kind of down, if you will, when we went in there. So I go in ready, and the lady looks at me right in the eye and said, I said, I'm here for my appointment. And she said, sir, your appointment was yesterday.
Wow.
And, it's such a small thing.
Yeah, but
it's such a small thing. Like, I could be like, cool, can I make another one?
Yeah.
It'd be fine.
Right.
But it wasn't fine, because I knew at that point I knew I needed help, and I had come to terms with it. And so when you, as someone stubborn, full of pride, comes to terms with there's an issue, right? Now we're obligated to fix it. We need to get to this now, and
that's cool that you identified that, because right? That's just something you would not, in your normal state, would not do.
No.
Miss a whole appointment.
Yeah, but by
a day.
When I have my now 14-year-old daughter, and I have I have my 2 littles who they may or may not notice, but then of course my wife, they're the ones saying this is weird, this is weird, this is weird. Right. Over time, I'm like, what? It's kind of weird. This is not. I'm not functioning the way I'm supposed to. Yeah. And which is weird because my work ethic is still there. I'm still performing. I'm still doing things. I'm well. I was in school at the time, and still making A's, but. So everything looks normal at surface level, but they know something's wrong, and so I know something's wrong, and that's not always the case for some people crash. They start crashing.
Big time.
Can't stay. They don't wake up even to go to work, and then they lose their jobs, and then or addiction or whatever.
These are the signs of the invisible wound.
That's
without seeing it, which is. I know our audience is waiting to know about who's Izzy, but this is like the perfect way to segue into who Izzy is and how Izzy came into your life.
You're right. So just kind of once that happened at the VA, it was the thing about this particular VA is right behind it is this drop off, and I don't remember if it was water. I don't remember if it's like a railroad track, but it was the first time I just looked over the edge and I was like, I'm out of here.
Right.
And my wife says, I'll drive, and she like kind of threw me in the car. And I broke down as we're driving home. It's about an hour and a half drive, 2 hours of traffic,
Oh yeah, so, I've been to Lawrenceville. I know from here.
So the whole time I'm just like sobbing, just losing it, and I just couldn't be controlled. It's not, and I come from sexist or not, I come from a history of men's men.
You don't cry.
I wasn't raised by, it was boys and men that raised me.
Right.
So you don't cry, suffer in silence.
Right.
So, for me to be that way was, my wife was like, she pulled into the Carrollton VA and said, take him now. And they were like, sure.
Wow.
And so that day that changed.
Wow.
So we undergo treatment. We start undergoing care at the Carrollton VA, and they were amazing, exceptional. But my wife is also a professor, teaching at 3-4 different universities at a time, just an adjunct. So there's a little bit, you may not get a class next term, right? And so she's also doing her own school and her own work, and then my kids are involved in activities, and I'm a coach in some of these activities, and so she realizes she can't do it alone. Yeah. And so then we start looking to get into the caregiving support groups, stuff like that. Right. And we don't qualify for some of their stuff. And so there's some limited qualifications and stuff, but we don't qualify for an extra set of hands. Right. So she goes and tries to find all these different programs. Nothing works. And then one day she comes in, she goes, what about a service dog? And I said, okay, I'm listening. And she goes, I'm gonna do some investigative work. And I'm like, I don't know what they do. I can see, but she's like, don't be daft, she's walk off. And then she came back, she goes, well, I have good news and bad news. We can get a service dog. Great, good news. She goes, it'll cost around $30,000 base. And I was like, whoa. Did I mention I was a veteran? I don't got it like that.
Right.
Who does, Who does?
Yeah.
Who can just go in and say, hey, I'll drop, between $30,000, $60,000, $100,000 on a dog.
Right.
Not many of us. And so, we love our fur babies, but so Izzy is an incredible story. She's through this investigative work. Naomi comes across this group in Facebook, and one of the ladies there, husband went through Healing for Heroes, who is out of Peachtree City, and she said, I'm gonna call on and apply with this group. And first, they're life-saving. They you have the owner, Piper Hill, and then the director of operations, Chris, who was Chris Albright, and they took my application, and I think I had just run over the class right ahead, but then I was in the following class. Crisis happened in January. I was undergoing multiple forms of treatment. By March, I was now in training with a service dog by June. Wow. So I show up to Healing for Heroes. That's healingforheroes.org. Number 4 heroes.org.
Nice
See that
plug.
Nice plug.
Yep.
Okay. And so I show up, I get there, and the first thing they're like, all right, well, we're going to, I had to do some paperwork and talk about injuries and things like that. And then, but when I'm physically there, they're like, all right, we're going to do this puppy parade, right? And so, in here, they just bring out all these different dogs. And they're all different levels of training, all mostly obedient, all the way up through obedience, but a couple with some advanced stuff. Because they believe in growing with your handler, which is I've learned is an amazing model. And so this dog comes in. It's like a lab golden mix, and just dirty and just head down and just really looked like he'd been gone through the ringer. And they tell you, write down the names of your 3 favorite dogs. And so, they introduced Izzy to everyone, and nobody put her on the list. Wow. But I did. This is my first one.
Really?
This is me. Yep.
Wow.
Because she stopped and she kind of looked at me, and it was, I'm the only one she stopped at. And so, but she didn't make a show of it. She just stopped and looked. All right. And just kept going. And then, and then I listed the other 2. And now, keep in mind, Naomi at this time is thinking, I'm going to come back with this Mastiff or like a really sleek-looking German Shepherd or just something, cool.
Right.
And after the puppy parade, I go and I walk. You're supposed to go walk all 3 of your dogs, the ones that you're interested in. And I'm like, all right, this is Izzy, and I take her, and immediately she locks to my side in a really tight heel, and she just the whole time is checking on me,
Wow.
and it was just weird, like,
Yeah.
man, who trained you?
Yeah, yeah.
And then we hung out for a few minutes, and you know what? I never walked the other two. I walked to Chris, and I said, this one.
Wow.
And he said, I could tell.
Yeah.
There was no question, there was no issue, there was nothing. And then so we go through this week of training.
Mm-hmm.
We go through and we get our certifications, and you basically you're going through a good citizens test, public access type testing, where that allows to prove that your service animal can enter a public space without being disruptive, that can perform certain tasks, that can handle moving with strangers, or can handle, they're not just going to leap and bound at whatever they see, chase trucks,
Right. Yeah.
And that sort of stuff, because the thing is, it can't be disruptive. And so we went through the week, and now Naomi put me in a hotel this week.
Okay.
So I come back on, I think it was the Friday, and she said immediately, she goes, "Oh, you're different." And this is Izzy. And so Izzy immediately integrated into the family.
Right.
She goes everywhere with me. Now, there were some things we didn't know about her. A couple nights before they came and did the puppy parade, a handful of dogs came in from the Angola State Prison.
Okay.
And so the Angola State Prison has a program called the Pause Program.
Right.
And they work with different groups, and these dogs are intensely trained over a course of a year.
Wow.
Or more.
Who's training them?
The inmates.
Inmates. Okay.
Yeah,
gotcha.
yeah.
All right.
So for me, the from what I understand, and the warden's wife actually found Izzy's litter on the side of the road. The mom had been hit by a car, and so they brought her and kind of raised her up, temperament tested her.
Yeah.
Some rumor that she started as a narcotics dog. She knows she knows search, and she knows some really cool commands. And because they don't just train this, they for service dogs, but they train narcotics dogs, public service dogs.
Yeah.
And so, but I do know that she spent a lot of time with one of the inmates who was a cancer patient.
Yeah.
And then her trainer, the inmate, was Lewis Preston, who this was his calling, and that's a whole other story. But I have such a deep, profound love and respect for this individual I never met.
Wow.
Because what he has trained and given me was a life. Wow. Izzy she can alert on low blood sugar. She can alert on seizure. She can pick up if you drop a credit card on the floor, which would be hard for you to pick up.
Right.
She can pick up and hand to you. She runs heels. She can search for things. Her capacity to learn is unlimited as far as I'm concerned. And for me, she specializes in deep pressure therapy. So if I am having a nightmare, she'll jump up on me and lay on me. It'll wake me up. But unlike another human who tries to wake you up where you may attack them, for some reason, and the Army has done some really interesting studies on this, we won't attack a dog from a nightmare state to sleep usually. So that's never happened. And I'm not the type that when I'm having a nightmare, it's not explosive. I do a lot of thrashing and then I wake up, and then fall back asleep usually.
Wow. But, so now that's it. Wait, let's pause on that for a second. So you're having a nightmare. She's obviously sleeping by your bed, right?
That's right.
She senses this, jumps on top of you, and is able to wake you up.
Yep.
Invisible wound.
Yes.
And she's able to sense this.
That's
now,
right.
Can this happen with anybody else? Like, is she trained to sense this in others as well, or is she more keen with you?
Yeah, so she has skills that she's open trained with anyone, and then closed trained with. So she knows my quote unquote tells when I'm having nightmare or night terror. They look very different. She knows when I'm just anxious.
Right.
She knows when I'm having a panic attack, because my panic attacks aren't obvious.
Okay.
She alerts on dissociative behavior. So when I dissociate, she'll come over and jump up on me and kind of give me a headbutt. But if we're in a store and somebody is pre-seizure, she'll alert on them. Or,
Wow.
And we didn't know, and I didn't know that she was trained for low blood sugar because she's not the type to just walk off and do her own thing. She's Lee, she's to me.
Yeah.
But we had an incident at one of the local grocery stores where a lady was walking by and she just wanted to go to her. Like as if maybe one day this was her dog, what I mean? Like
right.
It was very, and I said, and she says, what, she goes, isn't that a service dog? I said, yeah. I said, ma'am, are you, you don't have to answer, but epileptic or like low blood pressure? She goes, yeah, I'm diabetic. And I said, she really, really wants to be close to you. So, and sure, so she's all right. Well, she goes in this big purse, one of the hobo type bags, and she pulls out, and she's like, well, I'll be,
Wow.
And so it was a real like, oh wow, I didn't know she had that skill. I knew about the seizure alert, and so now I am a trainer with H4H, and so see, we brought it back full circle.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and so H4H or Healing for Heroes.
Okay.
And so I go and I help veterans or their families or other people.
Thank you for tuning in to part 1. Part 2 will follow this episode. Thank you for tuning in to the James Paul Show. I am James Paul, the content creator. Please follow the James Paul Show on Facebook at the James Paul Show. And we thank you all for coming in and checking out our show. You guys have a good time. And remember, create always.